Shalom Aleichem everyone, Assalamu Alaikum. Welcome to another video in response to Asher Meza's video, Islam is Avodah Zarah. This particular video is concerning the Geonim, that is the leaders of the Talmudic academies in Babylon, and the Halacha concerning wine and Gentiles, and Muslims. Again, I have to say that what Asher says about the Geonim is problematic because of historical inaccuracies, and also presenting a clear picture of Jewish law regarding the subject matter. Why do we have disagreements in Jewish law about whether drinking wine with Gentiles is prohibited? What are they based on and why? Also, how does Orthodoxy understand the nature of contrast? Rabbi Asher Meza quotes all of the stringent opinions concerning the issue and virtually ignores the lenient opinions. Those are topics for another video, but I want to do Rabbi Meza a favor by showing our Goyish viewers some basic components about the issue. What is all the fuss about wine? Orthodox Judaism prohibits drinking non-Jewish wine for two reasons. Number one is fear of idolatry. Was the wine used for purposes of idol worship, libations? Number two was fear of intermarriage with Gentiles. That is why the majority of the rabbis prevented drinking wine with Gentiles, if not for idol worship, for fear of too much fraternalization. That is also why one of the rabbis, Asher quotes, the Chida says Jews should not drink coffee with Gentiles. Interesting fact.
Or that of a ger toshav. Now this is ultimately actually a false distinction, because the notion that one is allowed to derive benefit from any non-Jewish wine, apart from just being forbidden to consume it, was not mentioned or ruled upon by Chazal, but by the Geonim, which some say, like the Rashbam, that it even included Christians, that Christians were also included in this.
Did the Geonim make a false distinction in Jewish law regarding wine? What false distinction did they make, Asher? Does Jewish law prohibit benefiting from Gentile wine, and were the Geonim in error? To answer this question, we need to see what the Geonim actually said. The good news is we don't have to look far because Rabbi Meza provides us the answer.
Different gods, my friends. Even the Rambam himself admitted to the fact that even according to his opinions, Muslims were not far from idolatry. He writes, and these Muslims are not distant from idolatry, and the ultimate purpose in that all the Geonim were lenient.
Here is Asher quoting the Rambam in attempt to prove that Rambam believed Islam was near idolatry. Rambam mentions that the Geonim were lenient about benefiting from wine, but we don't see the reason why the Geonim had their opinion. Notice the problem? Do you see the ... This is a distorted quote. I can see why Asher did not want to produce the full quote. He may have been unhappy that the Rambam said music was forbidden in Jewish law. But recall the ... Here Asher takes an important part of Rambam's words out of the quote. And these Muslims are not far off from Avodah Zarah, as you mention any more than a child of 1 day old, that Rav, Avodah Zarah 57a. So here we have Rambam saying that the Geonim used this section of the Talmud, Avodah Zarah 57a, with the Rav's arguments about Gentile wine. Why would Asher Meza leave the source text out of his quotation? Let us learn a little Talmud, shall we? The Gemara begins with a story about a Gentile climbing a palm tree, and he falls down and accidentally touched wine owned by a Jew. Can we still drink the wine? The rabbis ask. In the ongoing debate, Rav says that you cannot drink the wine, but you can sell it. Rav Kahana and Rav Asi then question the Rav's opinion by saying, Rav, didn't you say earlier that even a baby nochri, or a pagan baby, renders the wine yayin nesech? The Rav explained that yes, earlier he did say that a pagan baby would make the wine unlawful to drink. However, as Rav explained, you can still sell the wine and thus benefit from it because the baby had no intention to practice idolatry. An adult may have thought about idolatry when he touched the wine, and that would make it forbidden from benefiting from that wine. Now let us return to the question, Why did the Geonim reason the way they did? This is a response written by the Geonim in answer to the question, can we drink wine with Muslims with the knowledge of the fact that Muslims don't use wine for idol worship? They don't use wine at all, in fact. In the response, the Geonim say that obviously Muslims don't use wine for libations, and so you can benefit from the wine. But the Geon argued that Islam was still idolatry here, and argued that simply because Muslims don't offer libations doesn't mean that their contact with wine is less significant than a newborn or a Nochri child. Returning to our question, what false distinction was made by the Geonim? Here we see that the Geonim didn't even classify Muslims as non-idolaters. What halakhic innovations does Asher think they created? The Geonim read the Talmud and compared the Muslims to the Nochri child of Rav in the section of Avodah Zarah. The Muslims obviously didn't use wine for a religious purpose, and thus had no intention with it towards paganism, as Rav argued with regards a baby. This as opposed to wine with intention to use in a pagan ceremony, of course. So, the false distinction Asher says the Geonim made is in the very Talmud itself, and Asher distorts Rambam's quotation that the Geonim based their distinction on the arguments inside the Talmud. This thing that Meza calls a false distinction is also made by the Rambam, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Rema, and the Tosafot guys in the Ashkenazi world. Asher quotes somewhere in his video the Ben Ish Chai, who said that Jews can benefit from Muslim wine. Rabbi Yosef Ovadia ruled the same way, and that covers the Sephardic world too. So all the traditional authorities are wrong, and we have our YouTube rabbi to prove it, right? Wow. Are you guys ready for some more?
Look, this whole understanding on whether Islam is idolatry first came up because of the decision made by the Geonim not to usher their wine bahana, to allow us to at least benefit from wine that we were in no way allowed to consume. And this surprisingly also included the wine of Christians, as per Rashi. The reason given by the Geonim was that there is a difference between idolaters post-Chazal than the idolaters pre-Chazal. This is clear. So I think given all...
Asher holds that the Geonim innovated a distinction between pagans before the time of the Chazal and after the time of Chazal, and used this distinction when they made their arguments that you can benefit from Muslim wine. Asher says that this distinction between pre- and post-Chazal was the reason for the Geonim's position. But we already saw earlier that Rabbi Meza is wrong here. The reason given by the Geonim was provided by Asher Meza's distorted quotation of the Rambam. The Geonim said that Muslims are like baby Nochrim and don't use wine for pagan worship based on the Talmud. The Geonim, and in the responsa quoted, did not make any distinction on historical accounts, and in fact considered Muslims to be idolaters. Now suppose for argument's sake that the Geonim did make a distinction between pre- and post-Chazal idolatry without mentioning it in their response. Would that mean that the Geonim innovated another false distinction? The answer to the question is no, because the Chazal themselves made that distinction. In the Talmud, it is argued by some of the rabbis that Gentiles outside the land of Israel are not idolaters, but only follow the customs of their forefathers. This is a well-known passage, and there are many opinions in the Talmud, of course, and for the most part Gentiles are assumed to be idol worshippers. Many of the great rabbis, however, used this passage when it came to engaging in economic affairs with their Gentile neighbors, especially in Europe regarding the wine laws, and also in modern laws of halakha. Now, it is also recorded in the Talmud that the rabbis of the Great Assembly prayed and fasted for 3 days and begged God to end the evil desire for idolatry among the people. According to the rabbis, God answered their prayer and ended the inclination towards idol worship, and in effect ended the prophetic dispensation as well. That is a topic for another video, but the bottom line is that the sages, Chazal, themselves provided the reason why paganism virtually died out during their time. So here again the sages have said a metaphysical change happened in history which involved the cessation of prophecy and the inclination towards Avodah Zarah, something the Geonim, by the way, never used as a basis for their arguments.